guys, it's Andy
And Ayla.
and welcome to
Sinister Dynasty.
I'm going to be honest, and I've done this last minute again. I had tried to start really early and I got the first part of it done. When did I message you? On Sunday? No, Saturday, eh?
Saturday, yeah.
Yeah, and I got the research part done and then I forgot about it until today. So.
And I didn't even do one because I was in Christchurch at Chrome.
Flashing your tits.
Shush! I did no such thing.
This is why we need an OnlyFans. But yeah, I was given a list by Ayla about massacres in New Zealand, and I thought it was about, well, this is going to sound really insensitive, but I thought it was about time we did one. I was going to say had another one, but that's really bad wording, and I don't think we should be.
Do you know where the list is?
No, but I wrote down everything.
Do you know where my list is?
Where's your list?
Exactly where I left it a fortnight ago.
Nice.
Like, at my ass.
We're very onto it, as you can tell. Yeah, life's a bit stressful at the moment, but we're powering these out. We're powering through. We can do it. So I'll get into it anyway. So I have chosen to do I googled this beforehand, so I'm sorry if I butcher it, but Raurimu Massacre. So Raurimu, I'll say it in here, but it's about an hour and a half away from Taupo and 4 hours away from Wellington. So that's where it's located, somewhere in the North Island. I honestly had never heard of it before until
I've never heard of it.
Into this. Fun fact, so there's this game, it's the Amazing Moa Hunt, and you can you're meant to guess where the towns are in New Zealand. Yeah. And you get Easter eggs for them, moa eggs for them. Yeah, it's really fun. So anyway, I'll again just get straight into it. So Neville and Helen Anderson lived in Wellington with their son Stephen. I'll just say Stephen.
Where are we?
Stephen, the first line. Stephen, okay, with their son Stephen, so Stephen was studying dentistry, and
that's
they were in
a
Wellington.
good trade.
Well, it is a good trade. You get a
trade.
shit ton of money for it. You can get a shit ton of money for it, but you have to do lots of study too. And you have to stare at teeth all day. I don't know if I'd be cut out for that job, although I wouldn't mind popping pimples for a living.
People breathing on me is a no.
Yeah. Or at least you've got the mask though, so you don't breathe on them.
Still a no.
Still a no-go. So Neville and Helen owned a lodge just south of Raurimu. Yep. And so that's I literally just said it. It's about 80 minutes drive from Taupo and 4 hours drive from Wellington. So kind of near Okuni-ish, kind of.
Where's that?
It's where Mardi Gras is. The festival was real fun. So Neville and Helen knew their neighbours at the lodge quite well. The neighbours were called Henk and Helena van der Wettering. Yep, they're from the Netherlands. That's the last name. And they'd lived next door well before the Andersons built their lodge. So I think that at the time of the event, Neville and Helen had been living there for about 6 years at the lodge. In 1995, so this is 2 years earlier, Stephen was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
He was placed into the care of the Capital and Coast District Health Board, and he was given medication to help with the symptoms. But the side effects caused him to stop taking them, so he just had really bad side effects from them. So
isn't that awful when that happens, eh? You think you've got this thing that's going to help you and make you better, but it's psych.
Yeah, and there's no alternatives for it by the sounds of it either.
That's awful.
So he was using cannabis as well, using, I don't know, however you want to say, however the cool kids want to say it. So I'm guessing maybe that helped sometimes with the symptoms. So it was that anyway. So one weekend, Neville and Helen decided to invite friends to their lodge. They also brought Stephen along as they felt he was not well enough to be left on his own that weekend, especially as they were driving 4 hours away. So yeah, he just wasn't doing too good. So Stephen was about 24 or 25 years old at this time. I say 24 or 25 because I read a couple articles in there. They don't know how old he was. So he's mid-20s anyway, yeah. So the Andersons had 9 others join them. So they were couple friends. So Isabel and Anthony McCarthy, Raymond and Eve Spencer, Gordon and Andrea Brander, and Stephen Hansen and Michelle Churton were coupled up, and also they brought along their friend John Matthews. So on Saturday, February 8th, 1997, about 8 a.m. This is where it gets a bit hectic. I'm literally just diving into it. So everyone was sitting down about to have their breakfast, and then Stephen Anderson, so the mid-20-year-old, walked in. He looked quite stern, and then he said that he had had sex with a cat and a dog. So that's probably where they thought like the parents needed to take him with them because he just wasn't doing very well at all. So that makes sense.
Yep.
So his mum Helen was quite worried, so she asked him to go to the bathroom to wash up before joining everyone at the table.
I have to admit that's a pretty just go wash up.
Yeah.
But okay, yeah, fair enough. What else would you do?
Yeah. Well, Stephen left the room and came back out with a sawn-off shotgun.
Oh, where did you get that?
Well, we can chat about that
later.
Cool, yeah, so I'll get into the so Neville jumped up to try. So Neville was his dad, and he jumped up to try to take this off him, but Stephen shot him in the chest and instantly killed him.
Okay, right.
The others around the table quickly got up and started running, with Stephen continuing to fire shots, and one of them hit and killed John. Stephen Hansen called the police, but was also shot dead, with the policeman hearing everything on the other line. So the police, he heard everything. Apparently, he heard him begging, and then,
Okay.
Yeah. I got really upset by this case. Like, probably the most upset I've been in any of these. The Raurimu Massacre was quite bad as well. I got quite upset with that too.
That had like no humour in it whatsoever. So I'm feeling this is coming the same way.
Yeah, pretty much. And the Schleifer murders as well. That one was awful. So
they're all fucking like senseless deaths.
As Ayla would say, hold on to your butts because there's more coming.
My tights have a hole in it.
So at this point, there was 2 dead. So 3 dead. Sorry. So Stephen, John, and Neville. The other guests were outside by now, and Stephen followed them, and he was still firing the shots. He shot Raymond in the face as he and his wife Eve jumped into the bushes. But they pretended to be dead so Stephen would not shoot them again.
Good.
Smart, yep. Isabel was shot in the back as she ran, and Andrew was shot and killed next to her. So that was her husband.
Was she killed?
Yeah.
Or?
No, Isabel didn't die. She managed to push herself to the driveway before she passed out. So imagine that. So your husband, you see your husband fall next to you, dead, like shot, and
honestly,
then you have to. Yeah.
She's a fucking trooper, because I think I'd just want to curl up and die.
Yeah, well, they all are really. Yeah. So Hank and Helena next door had their son Rod visiting with his wife Kim and their 2 young children. They heard the gunshots but didn't think much of it, because you wouldn't really think much of it until Helen Anderson ran down their driveway screaming. Rod and Hank went to the Andersons' lodge to find bodies and blood everywhere. Then Rod ran back to the house to call police, with Kim taking his place with Hank. So Hank and Kim were trying to help the injured up the top. So more shots were then heard. So Rod got a rifle and then helped his mum and his kids into the car and tried going up the driveway. However, Stephen had jumped over the fence at this point and was in his way, and he was running towards them. So the way Rod explained it in an interview was that he did have an option to reverse up to the main road, but it was too steep, so he just couldn't do that. So he was stuck pretty much. So Rod got out of the car and used it as a shield while he aimed his rifle at Stephen. Stephen then dropped to the ground, catching Rod off guard, and shot him in the face. So Rod was threatening to shoot him, but
he
got
dropped
shot
out of his line of shot and shot him. Oh goodness.
Yeah. So amazingly, Rod was still on his feet and tried to get Stephen away from his family by jumping over the fence again before collapsing some distance later. Stephen followed him and shot a few more times before running up to the main road. So remember, that's where Kim and Hank are at the moment. Yeah. So that's only the first page.
How many pages do we have?
Oh, I've got 4, but...
Oh, God. Okay.
Actually, no. That's half of it. Never mind. So by this point, Hank and Kim had got a trucker on the road to stop, and they were trying to use his radio to call the police, but the reception wasn't good, and so the trucker had to drive slowly forward to try to get better reception. At this point, Stephen then jumped out from the bushes. The trucker heard a shot, and when he looked back, he saw Hank lying on the road with blood coming from his head, and Stephen was pointing the gun at him on top of him.
Oh, shivers.
Stephen then pointed the gun at Kim, but decided not to shoot her and ran back into the bushes. Kim then headed back to the Van der Wettering's house. Hink's friend and neighbour Colin Parker saw him lying in the middle of the road and first thought he had been hit by a car, but when he went to help him he saw the gunshot wound on his head. There was also an off-duty doctor who was able to stop and try to help, but Hink died in Colin's arms, so his good mate. And the doctor said too, I saw in an article that even if the wound happened outside of a hospital, he wouldn't have been able to be saved. So yeah, because I'm guessing it was in quite close distance as well, like quite close range. So the police were notified at this stage. Detective Sergeant Derek Webb was up in a chopper with a local pilot and was looking through the scrub around the lodge to try find Stephen. He then spotted an unarmed Stephen who was running around naked. So he must have reached a breaking point we reached a breaking point a while ago. So when Stephen did not follow the detective's instruction and lie down, Derek pointed his gun at him, which made him drop to the ground. The detective then jumped from the helicopter to secure Stephen, and then he said in an interview later that Stephen was very upset and crying hysterically, and that he had to comfort him. Yeah. I suppose he probably had come around by that point and been like, "What the hell have I done?"
Or he could not have. There's a chance that he may not have, and he's still in a delusional state. Yeah. I don't know how schizophrenia works, so I don't know if it is a delusional state that they're in or what.
Well, I kind of get into it a little bit later, but sometimes you can hear like voices in your head. Yeah. Or
stuff moves and you can see stuff that's not actually
and
there.
You believe things that aren't true. Yeah. Like it is pretty.
It's gnarly.
Yeah, it's quite severe. And I also want to point out, having schizophrenia does not make you a bad person.
No, it doesn't make you a murderer.
Want to point it out, yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know really how to respond to that, but having schizophrenia, like, it does not.
Yeah, it doesn't make you a bad person.
Yeah. Yeah. So about 2 hours after the shootings, the police were finally able to open up the main road where Hink was on, and they would let everyone go to the hospital or go talk to police or whatever. Yeah. So that was about 2 hours after the shootings. They'd been stuck on that road with the bodies, and I could not imagine that. So Michelle Turton was found in a bush where she'd hidden herself and stuffed a t-shirt in her mouth so Stephen would not be able to find her. Smart. Wow. Very smart. Rod was found near some railway engineering at the top of a nearby hill and rushed to Palmerston North Hospital. So I googled this, I wrote it down. I googled it, and it's literally 2.5 hours drive away. So I'm really hoping they had like the helicopter or something. Yeah. Because in my head, because I was living in Palmy for a bit, and I was like, that would be a very long drive for a mad rush to the hospital.
No, it would have been a helicopter.
Yeah. So when Stephen was taken into the station, he said that dog was God back to front, and that he shot his dad Neville because he was disguised as a dog. So I think that's relating to what he said at the start. He had sex with a dog and a cat, maybe. I think he was kind of like testing like the people at the table, maybe. That I don't know, that was just my link to it.
Interesting.
Yeah. And when the detective sergeant took him back to the scene of the massacre before the victims were moved, Stephen showed him where he'd put the sawn-off shotgun and also his clothing, so he could remember what he'd done. But I think he'd kind of come back.
Is that normal though? I don't know. I don't understand it.
Well, I think it's different for different people. Yeah. So it's like a spectrum thing. Like you can't just
class everyone under the same band. It's different. Yeah.
So his trial was in December of that year, so 10 months after the shootings in 1997. Stephen was charged with 6 counts of murder, 8 of attempted murder, and 1 of unlawful possession of a firearm. He was considered legally insane by the jury and therefore not criminally culpable.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's
it makes sense.
Yeah. So he wasn't in his right mind.
He wasn't
and
well.
There's no point in punishing him when he wasn't in his right mind. So it's better to have that help that he does need.
He was sent to a forensic mental health facility. I read it was in Porirua. I think that's how you pronounce it. Yeah. I read it was there anyway, so around Wellington. And his release from this could only be signed off by the health minister. So he was considered a special patient in it. You had to be the health minister to sign him off. Very, very high. So he was released in 2008 and given regular, I think it was around 2008, and he was given regular unsupervised visits out of the facility. And in 2009, he was released to live in Upper Hutt, although he was still being monitored by the facility as well. However, he was sent back soon after because he was caught smoking cannabis or using cannabis.
Okay.
Yeah. So in 2014, he was released again on a part-time basis, and I'm guessing. So this is just assuming, but I'm pretty sure the assumption's right. He had name suppression for everything. When he was
mentally unwell. He's not criminally.
Yeah. So in 2014, he was released on a part-time basis, and he began work as a tutor at the Inverlochy, I think that's how you pronounce it, at the art school anyway. But then the school found out, and he became unemployed. But I read an article that he was a quite promising tutor, but because of his past, understandable.
Yeah.
Understandable. So this kind of explains the unlawful possession of a firearm. So 2 years before the massacre in about 1994-1995, Stephen was arrested for hooliganism. All I think of when I think of that word is like,
Where's the word? I don't even know where we're at.
Hooliganism. Yeah, I think that's how you pronounce it. Yeah.
Close enough.
Yeah, so he had his gun license taken off him by police because of his health, and the police also tried to take Neville's away too, so that was his dad, but Neville was able to hold on to it because he said Stephen would never have access to any guns. So, I actually wrote it here. I took this to mean he would lock them away properly.
Yeah. So when you've got a gun safe and stuff, you've got to split up the gun.
Oh, okay.
So the bullets are in one area.
They said
the gun in the gun safe.
I think the gun law was still being reviewed at this time. I think it took a little bit longer after that Raurimu Massacre. I actually read that somewhere. I don't know why I didn't include it. They mentioned that anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So there was
Carry
that.
on.
Yeah.
Carry on.
So I said here, but Stephen found one, and it was in an old violin case. So
why
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so there's that anyway, yeah.
No comment.
Also, apparently Helen, his mum, had seen him with the shotgun 3 days before the massacre. He told her that people were coming for him, and she was quite worried but didn't act, although this is just me assuming again. I think it might have been when she took him to the lodge with them, but then again I also don't know if he was with them, if they were already in Raurimu before that happened. I don't know.
Okay.
Think what you will about that. Where am I up to? So this was brought up in April 1999 by a coroner called Tim Scott, and he said if the shotgun was properly locked away as it was meant to have been, then the massacre would not have happened. But he did not place blame on Helen for not acting when she saw Stephen with the gun. He thought that she just didn't want to believe how unwell her son was. And again, you can understand that.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. When I was reading it, I was kind of like, a little bit of blame. But now that I'm saying it out loud, I actually you don't want to believe the worst.
And you won't, and you'll turn a blind eye because it's awful.
Unknowingly as well. Well, not even unknowingly. Actually, no, I really. This is an assumption, especially because I've only just heard of it when you told me about it a couple of weeks ago. But I don't even think it was unknowingly that she left him to his own devices. I think it was unknowingly that she did. I don't think she thought anything at all like this would happen, because who would? Who would think that?
Sorry, I've got hay fever.
That's all right. So Tim Scott did blame Neville, though, who had promised the police Stephen would not have access to any guns. So that's how come he was able to keep his gun license, because he said that Stephen wouldn't have access to any of his guns because Stephen's gun license had been taken away.
You could argue though, devil's advocate, you could argue that it wasn't a place where he didn't think that he thought was safe.
Yeah, that's what I think too. There probably could have been some locks and stuff involved, but then like I said, maybe the law hadn't come into place about the locks and everything. I don't know. So you do feel a little bit of
and then another point to it, your son's very unwell and you'd be concerned about his health, so why would you have
guns around.
Okay, carrying on.
Yeah.
No blame, but carrying on.
Yeah, so interesting for sure, this. So there were a few articles written at the time that referred to Stephen as the gunman because he had name suppression, and one article called the gunman a cannabis-using schizophrenic. So at the time when I read it, I was like, because I hadn't got into it yet, I was like, what the fuck? Like, that's so rude. And then I kind of read it and I was like, it's still rude, but it's also not wrong, yeah. So my feelings changed a little bit, but it was still quite...
What did it call him?
Cannabis using schizophrenic. So when you first read that, it's in your face, and it's like, what the hell? And you think he's... Well, I suppose he is criminal. I suppose he is legally insane. Well, he was. I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah, so there was... Yeah,
there's a lot of... You could... Yeah.
We could go on and on about that. We're just repeating the same thing.
Kristen had to cut it, though, so we won't.
Yeah, true. So I also found 2 podcasts. So one by RNZ called Case Number 34, I think. I think it's called Case Number 34.
I quite enjoy RNZ.
Yeah, so it interviews Stephen, and another podcast also does. So it's one by the iHeartRadio.
Yes.
And they interview Stephen, the victims, the witnesses, and the Detective Sergeant Derek Webb, who took down Stephen.
I would almost think they were the same fucking radio station.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I got quite a bit of my information from these podcasts, although I didn't actually listen to the podcast. It was in articles. So shout out to those podcasts and do give them a listen because I think they give you a lot more information. And in a News Hub article in 2014 interviewed Stephen, and in it Stephen said that in his mental state at the time he was after a few specific people of the group who he thought were part of a bigger group trying to get him and destroy the world. I think that's what he was doing.
Okay.
Yeah, so he said that if he had been after everybody, then the massacre would have been way worse.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not a normal thing to say.
Well, again, I suppose there's just the mental health. Yeah, I'd know that. Yeah,
That's an odd thing to say, in my opinion. But
yeah,
you could argue that.
Yeah, he also said it was a terrible mistake, and that he knows he will always be the bad guy for some people. So, I just wanted to include that because I thought that was key information. Yeah, you do need to recover.
Yeah,
you do. I'm glad he went into recovery or whatever you call it, but yeah. Well, leave it at that again. Yeah, because I'm not a mental health professional.
No,
I don't know what I'm talking about, so don't listen to us. This is just us telling the story. So many of the victims and their families are still frustrated about Stephen's verdict and him being considered not criminally culpable. So Rod said in an interview that he wished Stephen was found guilty by reason of insanity rather than not criminally culpable. So he said in an article like it would have been just a small change, but it would have made a few more people happier.
What's the difference?
He would have been found guilty rather than but it would have been due to insanity.
Yeah.
But whereas what he got, my understanding was there was just no charges at all and he was acquitted pretty much.
But if he was acquitted, he wouldn't go to jail.
Yeah.
He didn't go to jail.
Well, I think even if he was, again, this is just me guessing, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but if he was found guilty by reason of insanity, then he'd still go to the mental health facility. I don't know if there'd be jail involved or not, but because he was found not criminally culpable, there was just no charges against him. Like there was no, he was found not guilty. Yeah, he was found not guilty.
There's so many options.
Yeah. So, and Helena van der Wettering, Isabel McCarty and Gordon Brander filed a $2.6 million lawsuit against the DHB for not recognising or doing anything to stop Stephen's behaviour, but this was thrown out in June 2000.
Why?
I don't know. I should have looked into that.
It's a solid case. Like, why was it not picked up?
I mean, I suppose he was prescribed medication, but then he wasn't taking it. Then if they'd been monitoring him, then they would have seen that he wasn't taking it or assumed it wasn't
working. And then they'd be able to try a different medication. Or they'd be able to try something else.
That's a fair point.
And, interesting.
I should have looked into that. I'll leave that to Chris to do.
That's annoyed me.
Yeah, I found that quite strange as well. At first I thought it was going to be against the Andersons, the lawsuit, and then I read that it was against the DHP, and I was like, oh, okay, no, that makes a bit more sense.
Yes.
Because I suppose, like you said, like we've chatted about, the Andersons kind of did what they... Sorry, my stomach is grumbling. I'm hungry, man.
Okay, let's smash this out so you can go eat. I'm going to go shopping.
My partner told me to eat beforehand. I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm going to be hungry for dinner. Anyway, sorry. Getting sidetracked. So Isabel also blamed Helen, Stephen's mum, for the massacre and said that if her and her husband Anthony had known Stephen and the other guests were going to be at the lodge, they would not have gone. They were only there in the first place because they knew that Neville had just been diagnosed with cancer, so they wanted to show them their support. Yeah, so that was the reason why they went.
I mean, I think
that's a good reason to go. What do you mean?
I don't know, that's weird. I find that to be a weird thing to say.
Well, maybe they're antisocial. Maybe they don't like dealing with people. I don't like dealing with people.
I know, but it just seems weird to me. Like, oh, it's just going to be us going for there, and there's only going to be 2 other people there. Like, there was how many fucking people? Like 11. Like, that's
11 at the
big
temple,
fucking number.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that would have slipped out in conversation. Oh, there's going to be, Judy's going to be there.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, well, I don't know. Anyway, that's what she said.
On. Not blaming anyone, but carrying on.
So, also, one of the first things Helen said to Isabel and Anthony when they arrived was that she was sorry, but that she had to bring Stephen along, as she didn't want to leave him alone in Wellington. So, it was one of the first things she said. So, I was like, oh...
I mean, it was most probably meant to be an adults-only trip. Like, she's dragging her kid along.
Yeah. So, interesting as well.
Yes. Fair point.
So, in an interview in 2017, or late 2016, I don't know, this was about 20 years after the massacre, Kim and Rod stated that they had forgiven Stephen for the massacre, but only if he never came near their family again, which I think is more than fair.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, absolutely.
So Kim was also understandably suffering from survivor's guilt, and Rod blames himself for not shooting Stephen, because remember that if he'd shot Stephen at the time, then Stephen wouldn't have been able to go up and shoot his dad. So Rod blames himself. Yeah. So, and then I suppose Kim is also blaming herself, or Kim was also blaming herself.
I mean,
awful.
You can see why they'd blame themselves, though, but at the end of the day, you're not
No, it's not.
You're not
their
a killer.
Fault. Yeah, it's not their fault. Like it's
not at all. And your, humanly instinct has taken over, and you're not. It'd be difficult to kill a human.
Yeah, and then again, he literally pointed the gun at her and then ran off after she saw her father-in-law shot in the head. That's insane. That poor woman.
I know. But there's nothing she could have done.
Exactly. There's nothing that they could have done. Yeah. And I suppose that's just what they've had to come to terms with, which would be so hard to do.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So at the time of the interview, the family were living overseas. I don't know what they're doing at the moment. The article also said Helena had moved overseas, but I don't know if that meant she lived with them or not. Yeah. Next page. Last page. So I also found out that one of the victims, John Matthews, did not know the Andersons at all. I think I said that at the start. But he was invited as a +1 by Michelle Churton, and Michelle had known Helen through work, and Stephen was John's best mate, and so Stephen and Michelle were dating, and then they brought John along as a +1 to the lodge. So I think it's just a +1. I don't know if the Andersons were expecting him or not, but he just tagged along. Yeah. So John's sister, Christina Tyson, said that she revisits a terrible memory every time there is a death related to mental health. She also doesn't blame Helen or Neville, and said she felt they did the best they could do in this situation. But she also said she may have found it a bit easier to cope, as she and John's family didn't know the Andersons, whereas the rest of them knew them.
Yeah.
So that was a fair statement too, I thought.
Yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to finish off with mentioning the victims. I want to shout out to Jeannie or Genealogy that helped me with quite a bit of this.
It's like, what are we shouting out? Is this appropriate?
No. So Neville Anderson was 60 years old, and 6 months before, Neville Anderson was 60 years old when he passed away, and 6 months before his death, he had been diagnosed with leukemia. He'd just recently retired from building due to his health, and he'd enjoyed being outside a lot. And he had the guns and everything. He would have fit in on the coast, I reckon. Yeah, he would just love being outside. So Stephen Hansen was 38 years old when he passed away. He had moved from Dunedin to Wellington in the early 80s and was considered a very nice guy by all his friends. John Matthews was 28 years old and best friends with Stephen. And like I said, he didn't know the Andersons at all and was invited as a +1, so just there at the wrong time. Anthony McCarty was 63 years old and loved being in his garden. He was a quiet and friendly man, and him and his wife Isabel lived near the Andersons as well. So that's how come they knew each other.
Yeah.
Andrea Brander was 52 years old and had been married to Gordon for 32 years. Yeah, she was very close with Helen and was considered an amazing woman. Henk van Wettering was 51 years old and was born in the Netherlands, and he moved to Aotearoa as a teenager. He and Helena had lived in Auckland before moving to Raurimu, 15 years earlier for a change of lifestyle. So a very big change moving from Auckland to a place we'd never heard of. There is a plaque in Raurimu to remember the victims, and there's 6 trees planted for each person lost. The plaque reads, "These trees were planted in memory of the 6 who lost their lives in the Raurimu shooting, February 8, 1997. And that's all I've got. I'm sure there's heaps of information that is out there that I didn't find. I probably could have found a bit more if I listened to the podcast, but quite sad, quite depressing.
That is
case.
An awful case.
Because it's mental health related. No, that's all right.
I'm so
sorry.
sorry.
Hay fever and my tummy's grumbling. What a way to finish the podcast.
I think my cat's been on this bed or something. I'm allergic to my cat, so I need to take a hay fever pill.
You'll live. Toughen up. What's it? Take a concrete pill. That's the one. I was trying to think of what it was.
Yeah. Oh well.
Yeah.
That was That was sad. That was sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, yeah. If the DHB had picked it up, if they hadn't taken a gun to the range,
there's so many ifs, isn't there, eh? And that's the saddest thing. And the fact is that I honestly believe he really can't be blamed, because it's a mental health condition, and again, like I said, it's on the spectrum, so people can experience schizophrenia differently as well. So you really feel for everyone involved. You really do. We
also don't know what level he was on the spectrum, so we can't exactly say that.
He always considered criminally, not criminally culpable, those keywords.
Google that. We're going to Google that after.
But that was our latest podcast. Thank you for listening.
Thanks. I'm going to take a hay fever pill.
Well, I'm Andy.
And I'm Ayla.
And that was Sinister Dynasty.